So you went to school in Chicago. That's where you and Scott
Yeah. So
met each other.
it was called the American Academy of Art. And when I went there, it was on Michigan Avenue, literally right across the street from the Art Institute. Have you ever been there?
I've been to the
Okay.
I've been to the museum.
Yeah.
I haven't gone into the school, but
No. So the school's not there anymore.
Oh, okay.
So when Scott went there, I think it was on State Street. It had been in different places because it was such a small school. It literally would be a floor or two of a business building. It wasn't like a huge, like brick and mortar. And then they moved to literally right across the street, Michigan and Adams. We were on the 16th floor, so some of the classrooms could look right down over the Art Institute. And I was not a good student in school. I was like flighty. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I think junior year, like March of my junior year in high school, I saw a program on PBS about Georgia O'Keeffe.
Yeah.
And, it's just one of those beautiful documentaries about her life and her living in New Mexico. And I guess being a young woman and having ambitious ideas about life, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to have a life like that. So that's totally, I didn't ever think of being an artist. I knew that my dad had gone to the Art Institute of Chicago in the 50s, but he never did anything with his art because how do you make a living as an artist? So I knew that. And I remember seeing like works, maybe in a drawer or something in a little frame that he had done. But then he after college, he never went in that direction, and he did odd things and worked a little bit in advertising, but just mainly odd stuff. So I remember telling my dad, I don't even know how it came about, but maybe could I take Saturday classes at the Art Institute? Mm-hmm. And so they had a high school program. So every Saturday you could do classes. And so it was like a big deal for me, I think, the summer after junior year to go downtown. I lived in the suburbs, which was Oak Park, but it was still on the train. So it's almost like Brooklyn, meaning you could still take the train to Oak Park. Mm-hmm. So I could just hop on the train and go downtown. And, but it was exciting, to be that age and be able to go into the school. Because nowadays, I think they've satellited, meaning that the Art Institute, the classes aren't so much in that building. They're like around. Whereas when I was in high school, like you'd go to that building and you could walk through the museum and you could like be in the big rooms in the back. But they didn't teach, it was abstract, or the teachers were all kind of checked out. I just remember it kind of felt like babysitting. Yeah. You'd go and you'd just be in this room and the teacher would even be in there. And it was just sort of like, oh, here's some art supplies. Yeah. So I don't remember learning anything, but it was just exciting to go downtown. I felt grown up. And I guess my dad had kind of worked with a guy years and years earlier, some advertising or illustration guy who taught at the American Academy. Mm. And so maybe word of mouth or something, all of a sudden, and I'm not joking, all of a sudden, I told you I was not good at high school. I was not good at school. I was very social. I was very flighty. My parents weren't strict about school. So I really did not know what I was going to do. And my dad showed up at the end of high school and said, I've signed you up for summer school at the American Academy of Art. Mm. I was like, what? Like, whoa. Okay. Like I never heard of it. Now, Scott, when he went there, people recruited. Mm. So he had someone come to his school, his Catholic private school, and recruit. Wow. And that's how he knew about it. And then he went and did Saturday classes and got a scholarship. So I had no ability to draw. I mean, I had no sense. You didn't have to. You really didn't have to. So I went to summer school, and the American Academy of Art was based and kind of started on the idea of Andrew Loomis's illustrations book, A Creative Illustration. Yeah. And he taught there forever. So you would have life drawing for 3 hours and fundamentals for 3 hours in one day. And the fundamentals just went from day one, page 1 of creative illustration, and each month was a chapter. So for summer school, it might have been a little bit accelerated, but I was like, whoa, I had no idea. Was not an artist. I did not know how to draw. And I guess I thought, oh, maybe I'll do graphic design. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe like, I'm so old. I literally thought maybe I'll do key line paste up. Like, I had no idea. It was like, I was still living at home, so I didn't have to do anything really. I didn't have to make money yet. And school was scary. Like, some of the teachers, I think, let's just say, I'm sure you've met people like this where, they're working artists. They're not that happy to be training 18-year-olds, 24-year-olds to like do what they do. They just don't have the patience. And so I just remember one of the teachers, like, he wasn't all that interested in helping you. Yeah. It's like, you figure it out yourself. And if you can't like jump through the hoops, good luck. And so I just felt scared and intimidated. But there was the life drawing teacher named Mr. Parks. And he was like a Mr. Robinson, Rogers, Mr. Rogers. He was gentle. He was like something from an old illustration, like Norman Rockwell. And he had gone there after World War II. And he just went, he started to go to school there in the GI Bill after World War II, and then just stayed, never left. And so he had seen artists from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, until then when I started, and he just had such a gentle energy that even though I was like, I had no talent, I was like, I didn't know what I was going to do, I gravitated towards his kindness. So like, even after like 2 weeks of school, I was scared of the commercial art end, because I was like, there's nobody's going to help you over there. Like, to where, oh my gosh, like, I want to do that. Fine art, whatever, I'm going to go into fine art, like, which is so funny. And so that's like the story. And I think everybody, like Scott had Mr. Parks, every artist that me and Scott know that went to the American Academy of Art had Mr. Parks. Yeah. So he was the glue that everybody like was like, yeah, oh, did you have Mr. Parks? Or did you have Mr. Parks? And luckily I was the last person to have him. He retired, right after after a semester, or I think I had him for summer school and then maybe 1 year, and then he left. And so I was in school. I'd heard about Scott because Mr. Parks loved Scott. He was like the golden boy. He was the guy who came into school and like all the teachers fell in love with, and was like already making a living, like as a student. He would do commissions. He would take everything off the wall, and he would just, if somebody had an illustration work or this or that, he would just do it and make money. He still lived at home with his parents, but they didn't have a lot of money, so he had to work. And he got a scholarship, so that's how he was able to go. And he would come and visit Mr. Parks all the time. So that's how I had heard about Scott, and that's how I'd heard about Richard Schmid, and that's how I'd heard about Nancy Guzik and all these other artists, was because Scott would come back and visit all the time, and Mr. Parks would talk about them. And so for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you could make a living at art. I didn't even know, this is crazy. Like, how could people do that? But Mr. Parks would say, like, just pay attention. You just learn about Richard Schmid, or learn about these artists who are doing it on their own terms. And so I would go to their openings and shows that they would have around Chicago and sometimes in the suburbs. And I think it was like that next Christmas, I told my dad, who had gone to the art show, so he liked art. I said, Dad, you need to buy Scott Burdick, because I think he's going to be famous. Like Mr. Parks was telling us, like, these are the kids to look out for. And so the Palette and Chisel, which is a club, 2 miles from, it's literally just 2 miles from the Art Institute. And I had told my dad that, oh yeah, they have like these Christmas little shows. You should go buy something. And so he did. And he gave it to me for Christmas. Aww. And so it is like this, kind of like this love story. So we still have this painting in our living room. And it's a painting that Scott did from like a Renaissance fair. So it's of these girls like doing this. It was like an abstract background, but it was just exceptional for like a 21-year-old. And then so I was in school and I was in class, and I remember a girl next to me, very, very pretty girl. And she was talking about the fact that she was posing as a model at the Palette and Chisel.
Mm.
And of course, all of us were like, oh my God, like, how do you get to do that? And I mean, it was just for portrait. It's like, how do you get to do that? That sounds amazing. And so she told me, she goes, well, why don't you show up the next time I'm posing? And which was like the next Sunday. And I mean, I was very like shy. I mean, not shy, but even being downtown Chicago was a big deal for me. So like my parents took me, like I got dressed up. I mean, we went downtown. It was a big deal. And we went to the Palette and Chisel. And I remember because just you had to walk up all the way to the third floor. And I literally thought I was going to have a heart attack. I mean, I was so scared to go up there with all these big artists. And there I saw my friend, and Scott was the monitor. So I kind of walked over to her, and the first thing out of Scott's mouth was, you should pose for us. And I just started to scream. I was like, oh my God, okay, oh my God, this is like the best day of my life. I was so stupid. But I was like 19. I was really, I mean, you think I'm hyper now. I'm old. I'm like really old. When I was 19, like, forget it. And so, but I remember it was like January, end of January, beginning of February. And he says, oh, the next slot is April. And I was like heartbroken. I'm like, oh my God, I have to wait that long. And I was like, oh man. But I was still excited. And I got to tell him, I go, oh my God, I have one of your paintings. Like I had just gotten it for Christmas. And so he was like, really? Oh my God. And so if you think about New York, right? And you think about like the Selma Gundy. So everyone comes in from all over, like even Reading, right? You come into the Selma Gundy. Well, it was the same thing with the Palette and Chisel. So when I told him where I lived, which was Oak Park, he goes, oh my God, I live in Oak Park, because he had moved out of his parents' house and had an apartment in Oak Park. And I was like, you live in Oak Park? So it was just like this weird thing that we lived so close to each other, even though it was like far from the city. And so anyways, the long story short, we always like to tell this story because he was like best friends with Nancy Guzik. And so I left. And then Scott went up to Nancy and said, oh, that girl, she's going to pose for us soon. And Nancy looked and she goes, oh, you mean that girl you're going to fall in love with and marry?
Wow.
That's the story. And anyway, so, but luckily, I think a week later or something, another artist, because art clubs, like models come and go. And that's why it really wasn't that special, I was asked, because we're always looking for models. And I got a call out of the blue saying, oh, we need a model tonight. And it was a Monday night. And I was like, oh my God, okay, oh my God, oh my God, okay. So I went and posed. And so I posed a few times before that, April. And I just, would talk to Scott. And then it was like literally, we were just talking about the fact that we kind of like lived so close to each other. I'm like, oh, you go to that library? Yeah, I go to that library. Oh, you go to that movie theater? Yeah, I go to that movie theater. And so the next week, he asked me out to see a movie. And it was like our first date, February 20th, 1989.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's literally how we met. And literally he was my first boyfriend. And literally it was like, oh, we happen to live to each other. So that's why I'm thinking the universe is kind of weird. How it brings you together and how you're like, whoa, me asking a friend, like, how do you even pose there? Showing up on the day where he's a monitor, telling him I just got a painting from him. And it was just this weird, like, kismet, like, bringing us together.
Wow, that's amazing. So after that, you finished your studies at the American Academy.
Yeah, so I was living at home. Scott and I were going out, and I would go to the American Academy for school. I'm a slow learner, and I don't actually have natural talent. I just have enthusiasm. So I would go to school. I was never good in school. I was never the person that got the work put up. After a while, I became a member of the Palette, and then I would go to the Palette and do model sessions there. But it took me forever. It was a very slow going. But Scott and I went out for a couple of years. Like, I was 19 when I met him. And I finished the academy in like June of when I was 21. And we moved in together in July when I was 21. So we moved into the city and moved into an apartment. And he was making a living, not a ton, but he was able to sell his work. And he was able to do like, drawing commissions or portrait commissions here and there. And he would do also like fantasy magazine covers, like Dungeons and Dragons. So he was doing like covers for that type of stuff. And he started to teach workshops even way back then. So we were able to make enough money every month just to pay rent. I had my parents too. So we only lived like a half hour from each other. So I was never that worried in case like we need an extra couple $100 here and there. But it was like we were able to make enough to like be artists, and live in an apartment.
So you both graduated and then you just jumped right into an art
Well, he
career?
was like making a living while in school. And that's when I met him because he'd gotten an apartment in Oak Park. And, but to be honest, he was able to do that in a way, well, because he was just so talented, but then he was able to start teaching workshops and start doing stuff and get magazine articles because he knew Richard. So Richard had come back to Chicago. Richard Schmid, yeah. But he was kind of rusty a little bit, because he hadn't just moved back to Chicago. He'd kind of taken a few years off of like painting from life. He was starting to get back into painting from life, and he was a man in his mid-50s meeting all these young artists, and it revived him. Like, I mean, literally, he was, he had been divorced now, and he meeting like Nancy and Scott and Rose and Dan Gerhardt's and Ramel de la Torre and Clayton Beck and all these artists who just were like hungry to have a master like him. Yeah. And then he was hungry to have young people who wanted to learn. So it was like perfect. So they would paint at the Palette and Chisel together all the time. They would actually paint off campus. They would have shows together. And that's why when I was in school, I would go see their shows.
That's awesome.
And also that's how we knew about the Palette and Chisel, because they would have little shows together. But Scott learned a lot from Richard. And, and then there was galleries outside of Illinois that Richard was in that then welcomed Richard's friends. So Scott was able to send work to galleries in like Oklahoma or other places that loved this alla prima loose, or at least not even if it's alla prima, but just this sort of romantic impressionism that people were doing that was figurative. So he was able to sell his work. And so when I moved in with him, he was able to have not a huge income, but at least a somewhat steady income. I didn't make money for a long, long time, but I would at least sell paintings that were really cheap. I mean, like, like they were like Mercy buys. I mean, really, I think about when I look at stuff I did in my early 20s, and I just think those people were giving to charity, It was like a few $100s here, a few $100s there. I mean, and it was just to like almost make enough money for art supplies. And then we pretty much lived off of what Scott made, even though it was little. And then just slowly. And then finally we actually moved down here because we wanted to actually travel. That was our goal. Like Scott and I, we knew we weren't going to have kids, and our desire was to see the world. Mm-hmm. So for us to be able to see the world, it was too hard to then pay a high rent. Yeah. So we moved down here, which is really weird. But my dad did give us some money for a down payment. And we looked all over North Carolina and a little bit of South Carolina for a very cheap kind of old house, not a lot of overhead. And so that way we could, have enough money to travel. And that's how we moved down here. So I was like 26.
Wow.
It's been a long time. So I'm probably, I'm more of a North Carolinian than I am a Chicagoan. But, when you grow up in a place, it's like it never leaves you in a way. Like you're still kind of Chicago, even though you're going to be here much longer.
Where's the accent?
Chicago.
You have it? I don't
know.
Well, hear it.
I hear it sometimes.
Yeah.
Some of my A's. But, my God, if you talk to my sister or my mother, it's scary.
Does it come back when you see your family?
Maybe, but I don't know if I ever had such an extremely strong, but I'll hear it. I'll hear it every now and then when I hear my own voice on a video or something.
Yeah. I'm from Massachusetts and have the Boston accent, but somewhere along the line, I think when I moved to New York City, I started
I
to
don't
cover
hear it in you.
Yeah. No, get a beer in me, and I say apartment and
yeah.
wicked good. Talk to my mom, and it all comes back. But my brother has it, my sister has it.
Yeah.
Both my parents.
Oh my God. I'm sure when you talk to your family on the phone, you're almost, to me, when I talk to my sister, I'm almost like, holy cow, it's like the Bulls, like on Saturday Night Live. Yeah. You're like, really? Like, wow. Or the Bears. I'm like, dang, like you need to be in a cartoon.
Yeah. My wife sometimes like jumps back like, what did you just say? And I'm like, oh, I just talked to my mom for a little bit on the phone.
Yeah.
But that's great. So you're here. Did you pick up any of the North Carolina accent? Or no? So you've been here since you were 26.
Yeah, since 96.
And so tell me about, how did the career start to, move after you moved down here? How did you build it?
Well, I think the type of art we do, the type of things we did, it didn't matter where you lived. Mm-hmm. So even when we lived in Chicago, we didn't make a living from Chicago. Like there weren't galleries there that you could make a living off of. Every time we would do anything, especially Scott, it was outside. Mm-hmm. So it didn't matter where we lived. So when we moved down here, it was just the same. It was before the internet, but it was like Scott, there would still be a few galleries here and there that you would send stuff to. There were still places that Scott would go do workshops. And it was like we just made enough. I mean, it was before videos. It was before anything internet. You just kind of made enough money to sort of keep going. Probably one of the things that really helped our careers, I mean, especially mine. I mean, Scott became well known when he was quite young because of Richard. Like there would be magazine articles and he would win some awards here and there. And but for me, I was always like a supporting character. So probably one of the first big deals was, and I don't even know what year it was so freaking long ago. I'm going to say 15, 16, 17 years ago. The first weekend with the Masters.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
I do, yeah, because Selma Gundy had it for a while. And I would pop in there and see it, right?
That's a different thing.
Oh,
so Weekend with the Masters was an actual convention.
Oh, okay.
So it was hosted by American artists. And the very first one was in Colorado Springs. And that's actually where we met Jacob Collins. He was one of the instructors. So I think they had like 7 to 10 instructors. It was started off small. And it all really started, and I'm going to give shout out to Allison Malfronte because she worked for American artists. She was like an editor, and her with Stephen Doherty, they kind of were like trying to do something where it could be like, how do you get artists to get together and learn from each other? And she called me and Scott out of the blue, and she was asking us to be instructors. And I, at that time, had never taught before, and I did not have any following, and I was in the shadows. And I remember telling her, going, I don't think I can do this. Like, I mean, no one's going to sign up for me and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, she had seen a drawing of mine. So I can't even remember how or where. And I would get a lot of stuff because of Scott. So, an editor, a gallery or something would meet me and say, oh, she's an artist. Okay, well, we'll show her too or something. And so I would get this secondhand offers, meaning I'd get opportunities that I probably didn't deserve in general. But that's life. There's a lot of nepotism in the world, and there's a lot of nepotism in the art world. So I think I had been invited to some kind of article or I can't even remember, but maybe I entered I don't know, but it was a drawing, a pastel drawing of a young girl. And Allison had said to me on the phone, oh my God, no, I love this drawing. You could totally, teach drawing. And in those days too, like drawing was always like the ugly cousin, like everyone wanted to do oil painting. So I told her, I said, well, I don't even feel good teaching drawing. Like, I don't think I can. I said, the only thing I feel that I can maybe do is, and you're going to laugh, because I mean, I kind of felt it was going to be one of those asks like she's either going to say no, or they'll put it up there as an offer and no one will sign up. And then it'll be like, I'm sabotaging myself. Okay, see, I told you couldn't do it. And I told her, well, I think the only thing I would feel good doing is teaching quick sketch, like figure drawing, like quick. Because, I mean, if you think about it, what do? Like you do a 3-minute drawing or a 5-minute drawing.
Super accurate.
It doesn't have, there's not a lot of expectation. And it was the only thing I felt slightly confident in because maybe they were quick. Right. It wasn't like so much technique. And it was like, I really felt she was going to shoot it down. And I think since it was the very first year, and I think since she was trying to get this started, she goes, okay, no, that sounds good. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And yeah, I think it was Scott and me. Who else was teaching? I think Mary White, maybe Scott Christensen, Jeremy Lipkin, Jacob Collins. There was literally only 8 to 10 teachers. And I was not, I don't know. I mean, I was like this weird, like, okay, just because I married Scott. But it was such a success And so many people came to Weekend with the Masters in Colorado Springs. Then they did it in Laguna Beach. They did it in Monterey. And they did it in one other place. And it was just, then it got so big. And then unfortunately, American Artists got bought out and went out of business. And that thing went kaput because they even wanted to keep this Weekend with the Masters things going. But they fired everybody who did it. So I remember talking to the people who were organizing. And anything that gets really popular and super exciting, all of a sudden, everyone's like has an opinion or wants to do this or make more money and become greedy. And so the people who bought out American Artists pretty much told everyone, you're fired in a few months. They still were like, well, would you run this the Weekend with Masters for us? They're like, no, why would I do that? And so it just disappeared.
Wow.
And so you realize that like corporations or things, like they're so short-sighted.
Yeah.
But that helped me a lot because people started to see me in a way that like was so different than just a wife of an artist. So it did change it a little bit. It gave me a tiny bit more confidence. And then I had local friends here. I've been in this particular arts building for about 16 years. I've just been in different studios. And I had a friend that said, why don't you teach a workshop? And, like, oh, no one will take it, blah, blah, blah. But she's like, no, you should do it. And so it was local friends. And so then I just started to do a little workshop here and there. And I think that is what makes me happy. I don't know about you. It's like, learning about something and then teaching somebody else what you learned is like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And so it gives me like reasons to actually study and to keep studying and to get better. I have learned so much about drawing and painting and all this stuff because I felt that I had to, which is like, I wish I would have done it in my 20s. I mean, I wish so much that I had just known more, been better, or I don't know. I mean, I guess things are just, the timing is, it happens when it's supposed to happen. And nowadays with information and internet and it's so much at our fingertips, it was harder then. I mean, you literally just had an art magazine or an art book to look at. You also didn't have email.
Yeah.
So how do you even keep in touch, or how do you, learn about other things? So it was a little bit isolating. Whereas now it's so exciting. It can be, okay, I can meet you. So I'm going to tell people how I met you. So literally on Facebook one day, I saw your post that said, you were kind of upset that people were charging so much for your books.
Yeah, I hate that side of it all.
And you just said that kind of like, oh, and it seemed so kind that honestly, I mean, I had seen your book a couple times with different, because it's such a popular book, but that post and the fact that I was going to teach an online class was like, I need to get his book. I need to know more to be able to actually answer people's questions. So I just ordered your book and I messaged you and I said, oh my gosh, I love your books and it's so exciting. I can't wait to get it. And you were so kind and you wrote back. And so we messaged a little bit and I was like, isn't this crazy? Facebook, right? You literally write somebody who's written a book.
Yeah.
So of course, I know you don't feel this. I'm just like, I don't feel it, but you're kind of famous and people, it's like this guy who wrote these amazing books, people put on, in this higher echelons. And so I was like telling people, I'm like, I messaged Todd Casey and he messaged me back, so it's so fun to think, how this works. And
that's how I felt. Cause you messaged me and you were like, I just bought a book. And I went and looked and I was like, oh yeah, you did. And I was like, I'm not letting you pay for it.
Well, no. And of course I made you give me, you were so sweet to give me one for free, but I made sure to buy it because I know another one, because I know how much I just know it. And I mean, it was kind of you to like do that.
I was just honored that you
of course.
Wanted it. And I was
but it's so much worth more than what they're worth. And,
but I looked at your work in Scott's Forever and I don't always mean to lump you in together. But I love your work, and I was like,
well, thank you.
Amazed that you wanted it. Like I said, when I wrote the book, I joke a lot that like I knew one person would buy it, and that's my mom and my dad. But I'm amazed that there was any success from it. I didn't come into it looking for it.
Well, that's the beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get beautiful messages now from people that I write them back and say, thank you for being kind and writing something nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy we joke because my text messages, I have fat thumbs, but sometimes we write the wrong thing. And, but that like you took the time to say something positive today, and thank you.
Aww,
Appreciate it.
That's the sweetest thing ever. Yeah. Well, anyways, I mean, to me, The Human Figure by John Vanderpool is my favorite art book of all time.
Yeah.
I mean,
we talked about that too, because that's a connection to Chicago as well.
Like it is. I remember when I saw his book in school, it was such a revelation. Like sometimes I tell people that, I'm not a line person. So having to draw a contour, having to draw a line and be so linear about things, or shading with a line, pencil. I mean, I guess I thought I would never be an artist because so many people love drawing with pencil, or, or like these sketchers. And it was like, oh, I guess that's not me. Okay.
And Vanderpool is more plain, right?
Vanderpool is more
Sculpture.
like a painting.
Yeah.
It's painting with charcoal.
Yeah.
So it's literally filling in masses and like shapes. And so that was such I don't know. I just fell in love with the way he did charcoal. So I recommend it to every single person I know. I always tell people to, if they can, like look on eBay or places to try and find the old ones because the reproductions are better. So
libraries have them too.
Yeah. So I have probably like 10 versions.
Yeah, the paperback, the new one that everyone gets, is good, but the bound ones are
totally.
Yeah.
Well, and then your books are going to be up there, and it's hard to know how you know that you're going to be seen in posterity in future. But Richard Schmid's books really changed a lot. Andrew Loomis. I mean, there's just a few books that stand out. I do think I love Kevin McPherson's books on color and landscape, and of course Edgar Payne. And so there's certain books out there that are just wonderful art books that like really teach you, or like George Bridgman, right? Yeah. Like I learned so much about human figure and thinking of it with weight. But your books are just. I was talking to you earlier about. I'm so appreciative because I don't learn well. I don't think I'm dyslexic, but I just don't learn well by reading. I'm a visual person. And so we were talking with Scott this morning about how you balance well the ideas, but also editing and simplifying, and also having the proportion of image to writing.
Yeah, I actually had to choreograph the whole thing, and I'm not, taking credit.
Of course.
But I actually went to school as an illustrator, and I was a failed illustrator. But the good thing that I illustrated was my own book. So I knew the value of putting a diagram to explain it simply. And a good friend, Kevin Weisty, said to me, make it so simple, not simple, but explain it so easy that anyone can get it.
Right. If somebody who's not an artist can pick it up, kind of look at the image, and you have like maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. I just feel like that is how I like it. And if I hate to say it, but if an art book has too much writing, now Andrew Loomis sometimes does have a lot of writing, but he's really good. He really is good if you take the time to read it. Yeah. But I'm not saying I've not read all. I mean, I literally just like, I've never even read The Human Figure. Yeah. I've crossed my heart. I hate to say it, like on the Bible. Like I have not read it. I just look at the images. So I just learn by the images. But I've read your book. Yeah. So it was, going picture. Okay. That's enough information for me to read right now. Like I like baby steps too. I like taking like 1 or 2 pages at a time. Right. And so anyways.
Well, yeah, I think as a teacher, that's what I try to do too, is it's often difficult, just like any kind of sport or anything. If you can compartmentalize things down into pieces and master them, a lot of what sports talk is about is like slowing the game down. But if you focus on bunting in baseball or base running or fielding, and then you put it back together in the game, then you can go back and work on pieces. I think it's just first of all, it's easier to digest. And I think I got that from James Gurney's book, who were fantastic, where he was like, here's 1 page of a concept, another page, and you don't have to like start at the beginning of the chapter. It's just a reference book, but also it turned into a kind of a coffee table book in which, you know, I was looking. I mean, the beautiful thing for me is that I get to contact artists and meet them and talk to them. And like in the color book, I talked to Ron Hicks, and I'm like, I love Ron Hicks's work. Mm-hmm. And he just kind of randomly called me recently just to talk, and I was like, I guess I'm friends with him now, which is amazing. But you get to then see how they work,
right?
And you know, part of it is just to put out information and say, Susan Lyon works this way, and Scott works this way, and I work this way, and you know, we all work slightly different, but it's a beautiful thing. And
it's so great. I'm just so proud of you. I mean, I don't even. I mean, it's like interesting to be proud of somebody who you don't know well. I mean, we literally just met today.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that maybe I can see in the future. Like I can see in the future when an artist is seeing your book in a store or in a school and putting it right up there with an Andrew Loomis, with a Richard Schmid, and just going like that is going to be a staple. And to know that you've influenced. And it's, you know, the cool thing is we were talking about how like the art world or careers have changed over time, and how artists, you know, have to be more proactive, and things just have changed because of the internet, and how you are like so proactive, but also now your job is to not only share information, enlighten people, inspire them, but also you get to like, then your job is to like go and meet artists.
Yeah, that's the part I started to like. For me, I think I was telling you and Scott over breakfast. I had done this big road trip and got to meet all these artists, and part of it was like artists wanted to meet me as much as I wanted to meet them, and it wasn't that they didn't know who I was, but they love to share. Mm-hmm. Some of them don't, but most people with open arms were just like, you're a young kid and you're interested and excited, and that's what I love when I meet people like that. And then you just get to like leave a seed with them of thought and then see where they take it in their career. And I thought, you know, kind of the inspiration for this podcast, videocast thing was, why not keep it going? I can still learn every day and then record them and put them out there and help others, you know, influence as well.
And the fact that you know cameras, you have the ability to go and do this stuff. A lot of people are probably going to be wondering, well, how did you even get to, you know, learn to do this and stuff? And it's little bit by little bit, you know. And
so frustrating at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I make so many mistakes, or it's just you learn by making mistakes, but then also you are willing to keep doing it, and you're so excited about it that you're just not going to find reasons to not do it. Like you're going to find reasons to do it.
Yeah, and I think the creator culture that came out of COVID at the beginning, that's actually when I agreed to do the color book, because my publisher called up and said, your first book sold out. And I was like, how? Like in like 3 months or something. And I was like, did my mom buy that many books?
Well, it's just showing you that it's needed.
I think it was like right time, and then it's a good book, and then people were talking, and the art world is small, and then, you know, hey, check out this book. But at the beginning, I had to do a analysis, and they were like, well, what are the ones in the market? And I was like, Andrew Loomis, Vanderpool, Gurney, Harold Speed, I think I had on the list, Juliet Aristides books, which are absolutely gorgeous. I love her books too, yeah, and I thought like that would be like the highest bar for me to be, even like what I feel like when I went into Water Street, because I studied with Jacob in his studio, and I was like, I would gladly be the worst one in here because they're so good.
Right.
And I just thought like, yeah, if I could scratch the surface of getting to like the worst Loomis book, which there's not a bad one.
Yeah.
But and then they took off and
I'm so fascinated with that. Well, right. I think you just hit the right moment, but you had the skills. So you were talking about how you had, you know, been you were a graphic designer,
illustrator,
so
animator.
You had.
I know, it was all around me.
It's like, it all led to this, because the ability to design, the ability of knowledge to even like understand that even if, I don't really know this too well, I know who to ask. I know where to find it. And that's a great thing.
Well, and jumping in, because I think we were talking about perfectionists too, and I'm certainly not. There's still edits in all my books that I get emails from people. Sometimes I'm like, I know, this is what it is.
Yeah.
But even painting is that. Sometimes I put something in a show and I follow my heart, and then I look at it 3 years later. I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
No, I know. I wish.
But taking that plunge and doing it,
Isn't it fun though? You can see, isn't it? I'm sure you're as a teacher. It's like so much easier to tell somebody else a suggestion.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of blinded. I mean, not that I'm totally blinded to my own mistakes, but it gets me so upset when I seem to maybe fall asleep, or maybe you're working too long, or I always equate it to like, how there's like a taste or a fragrance that you become blinded, like a nose blind. I become value blind. You're like, I'm like, how am I not seeing that? So I wish I could be my own critic too.
Well, we tried, right? Yeah.
No, I wish.
But see, teaching, I always feel like it keeps me honest.
Yeah.
Because I go in and I say like, hey, check your values. Are you squinting? Whatever it is. Are you considering the direction of the light in relation to the plane?
Yeah.
All these things. And then I'm like, am I doing that? And then I'm like, it's almost this great thing that keeps all these concepts on the surface. And then I go back and read the notes. So Cami Davis at the time was one of my teachers. She was Jake's assistant. She used to do his underpaintings. Phenomenal artist. And she used to kind of make fun of me because I used to write everything down. But I look at it now and I'm like, serendipitously, that's why when it came time to write a book, I had notes that I could refer back to. And but she's always like one of the angels on my shoulders that is like, did you check your halfway point? When you're doing a portrait or a figure or something like that. And it keeps us honest and I love it.
Yeah, but I guess I'm astonished at how dense I am. It's like, because it's easier said than done. So sometimes when I have a student, and I give a suggestion to, sometimes I try and, explain to them, like, I know that it was 1,000 decisions to even get to this point.
Yeah.
And I know that it's like, it's easy for me just to spew it out and say, well, okay, maybe simplify this or that, or judge the hierarchy of like your value. But I mean, I know, because I look at my work how we all have habits. It's like anything. I mean, there's just tendencies that we tend to do over and over. And maybe those are even the ones that we pinpoint when we teach,
Yeah.
And I'll tell students and I'll go, holy crap, I've done that so much in my paintings. And they probably, maybe behind their back, think I'm a hypocrite because, look, well, why doesn't she do that? And I'm like, because maybe I didn't see that in the past. And I'm trying so hard to do that better now. Yeah. But that is a gift. One of my philosophies too is the fact that I know I'm a very slow learner. I know that I had a lot of self-doubt. I was very much someone who didn't have self-confidence. And in a way, I kind of always knew, like I was very self-aware that I was lucky. Mm-hmm. I was very self-aware that like I'm 19. My dad put me in this school. I met Scott Burdick and Richard Schmid. Like, I mean, I'm just, it seems like a Hollywood story. Like, I didn't have to struggle to find fine art. Yeah. I literally was like, oh, here's fine art in front of me. But then the double-edged sword was I didn't feel like I was good enough. And so when I would get opportunities, and that's why it was like that weekend with the master's thing was like a very pivotal point for me because I almost wanted to sabotage it. I almost wanted to be like, Allison, like I'm not good enough, so I guess I'll do quick sketch. Yeah. I understand that's not good enough. Like I understand, but I'm not, and I remember even telling her I was going through an illness at the time and all these things that we do that are self-sabotaging. And I remember saying to her one day, Allison, I don't know if I'm going to feel good enough to do it. Yeah. And she was so kind. And she said, well, I know my sister's going through something also. And don't worry. Just don't worry about it. And so I kept seeing myself maybe putting it out there like maybe it will stop. Maybe I'll not do this because, and it's just so, I guess I'm saying all this because I identify with all the reasons why people sabotage themselves. Or when I mentor people, I completely get why hard it is to be self-motivated every day. Yeah. If you do not have to eat from making money with art, there is every reason in the world to stop a painting, to say yes over something else, to be self-critical. And I get it. Like, I guess also my teaching is I'm always thinking, gosh, my 23-year-old self that just felt like a loser. Now, people might say, well, why you had Scott? But Scott's a young guy too. Just because we're married doesn't mean that he's able to critique me, because I've always felt this. I can see that you're a super sweet guy. Scott has this sense about him that he would never want to hurt my feelings. Mm-hmm. So I think, in a way, it's incredibly hard for him to critique me. Mm-hmm. Like, everything I do is perfect. Well, that's not true. Mm-hmm. And so our relationship morphed around the fact that I needed to find real criticism from other people. Yeah. And I just don't think it was in his personality, but I also just think he looked at me with rose-colored glasses. Yeah. Like, everything I did was perfect. And also because we painted so differently. Like, I was always very soft. I was always very kind of more sweet. And he's always bold and kind of more masculine. That since we would do different things, I would always be so impressed with his juiciness, and he would always be like, oh my God, look at how sensitive your piece is. Oh, it's so perfect. And I'm like, but Scott, I need an edge somewhere. I need to have some balance. And so that's marriage for you. You have to figure out so I consider myself, when I teach people, what would I tell my 23-year-old self? Yeah. What would I love to have heard from an older person who could just be kind, but really matter of fact, but also hopefully be the most helpful. Not tell you something that you might need a year from now, but tell you a small something just right now, hopefully that's not too big of an idea. Yeah. That's hard. Yeah. When you're critiquing somebody and you might see 10 things, what to compute, all right, but what is the most helpful thing? And only say one thing. Yeah. That's what I'm always like, okay, well, because that's what brings confidence, is that you can make this a little bit better. Well, then, God, you're turned into a hot air balloon, Yeah,
and you can't tell them everything. Right. And it's not that you don't want to, but I don't know how helpful it is. Like, I do a lot of teaching online. I teach at the Academy of Art University, which is where I got my master's in animation. Or I didn't get it in animation. I finally switched to fine art, but one of the things that I was told from my mentor that was showing me how to teach online was you can't give everything. Right. Pick out 2 or 3 things and guide them and let them stew on the idea. If you give them too much, then it turns into a checklist. Mm-hmm. But it also sounds like different people play different roles, and some people, it's almost like the duality of parents, perfect, right? Yeah. Like, my mom was, if I wanted something, I know I could go ask her, and my dad would always say no. So I always went to my mom when I wanted something. Yeah. But then somebody else could tell a little bit more matter of fact, and that's the beauty of having multiple teachers.
Totally. And that's, I know a lot of other husband and wife artist teams, and, their dynamics might be completely different. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody's, and I know some husbands maybe were a little bit overly suggestive. Mm. And Scott was under suggestive. So there's this I was always like, well, Scott, come on, just tell me.
Be honest.
And the thing is
it to me.
Everybody's different. My art, I don't equate with my self-worth. And that sounds very enlightened, but I guess what I'm saying is that, I don't, if a painting sells or doesn't sell, I don't take it personally. Because I know the painting is the same. And it's not even that I have confidence. It's that because I know that certain people's paintings, you see something, it's so beautiful. And just because, and God, that didn't sell. It doesn't change the painting. I'm still in love with that painting of that person's. And I'm almost like, how did it not sell?
Well, and sometimes it just needs one person.
Totally. But I think Scott is much more sensitive. He's a writer. His artwork, his writing is very latched to how he feels about himself. Yeah. Where I just don't need the same affirmation. Even though I'm obsessed with art and I'm obsessed with learning, I don't know. Maybe I feel like this. It's a little bit more. I see things for what they are. I don't even know if I know what I'm saying, but I just don't. I don't have an obsession to show my work to people and say, "Isn't this good?"
Yeah.
You know, like, look. I can't do it.
You don't need people.
I don't know. I actually was like, don't look at it. It's fine. You know, it's fine. Don't look at it. Yeah, it's fine. You know, I guess I don't. You know,
like. Even though you sounds like you're at a good place now where you're like, you don't care anymore, but you needed to work through it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still get down on myself, meaning intellectually I should know better. But it's always it's like a physicality, just like being an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, am I technically able to achieve this effect in a painting? I still struggle with that. I still overpaint. I still, start paintings and get halfway through and then get to a point where I'm like, I don't know where I'm going, or I don't know how to fix this. And so I have dozens of paintings or drawings going at once, and like they stop, and then I start something else, and then sometimes I forget about them. And so so I'm still in that learning stage, which I think people feel that, like, if you've been doing it forever, you should know better.
You got it. Yeah.
But I still struggle. I think Scott is somebody who technical ability came easier, just like any eye-hand coordination. And so his struggle with art is saying something different.
Yeah.
And so in that way, that's even scarier. Yeah. Because then you destroy, you change, you destroy, you build up, you destroy. And so it's this like kind of like monster that you don't know what's right or wrong. And so he's in this like phase where, he's middle-aged. It's like he's done it all. Like, he's done the pretty, he's done the abstract, he's done the smooth, he's done the thick. And it's like, what is there to say? So he's like experimenting a lot. And it's, so he's doing a lot of experimenting where sometimes it's like a crash and burn.
Yeah.
I'm not as extreme, like for me, my experimenting is, I used to be so much more of just a value person, doing very neutrals, like not experimenting with color at all.
More naturalistic.
Yeah. And I don't even know like formulas. I mean, I wasn't even taught that stuff, but just, thinking about more like what is the value over like temperature or whatever. And now I'm starting to play with like just extreme colors I would never do before. What does it feel like?
That's one of the things I've noticed. Like,
well, yeah, I mean,
you should have been in the color book.
But I feel like the only way I'm able to do that, because where am I going to sell these? The only way I'm able to do that is to figure out ways to teach them as a lesson, and then help people get out of this idea that there's a perfect flesh.
Yeah.
Because I was killing myself with that formula of a perfect flesh, to where you almost just want to give up painting.
Yeah, it's boiling it down. I mean, Max Ginsberg always says, don't paint formulas.
Yeah.
And it's like, but we're kind of trying to get that in a sense, if we want like repetition.
Yeah.
It's almost like you finally break through. Yeah. And I always think like, all right, now I don't want to do that anymore. I figured it out. But
I still haven't figured it out. That's the problem. How do you, as an artist, first of all, allow yourself to take off time to like even do things that
right.
won't come out, or like, it's not school. We're not living in school anymore. So there's this mentality of like, oh, well, I need to be productive. Right. So now, like, as you're teaching or you're doing online class or you're mentoring or something or doing videos for Patreon, it's like, great, now it's productive. Like, I can say, well, Susan, let's play around with complementary or these colors or tertiary colors that like normally you won't use, but see what it's like. And I don't know. So it gives me something to wake up in the morning. Yeah. And trying little things that, right. And right. Because otherwise, I like recently, I've had a deadline that is so unappealing. And I find that it's harder and harder and harder for me to go to my studio. Yeah. I find reasons not to come to my studio. I hate to say it. You're going to laugh. But, I sit here and I turn on YouTube, or I literally will eat lunch and I will binge. I'll turn on, like, I've been binging the TV show House. And, it's like, oh, okay, I'll start working after this episode, or it's
All right,
like,
one more.
I find it's like you're just procrastinating because you realize your heart is not into it.
Yeah.
And you have to find reasons to have your heart into it.
Yep.
And so I think that's also bringing it back, is that I get why sometimes, I'm sure you have this too with your Patreon. Like, I'll have people approach me who are changing their life. Mm-hmm. They've either had an illness, or they're, retired, or something in their life has prompted them to say, I'm going to do art.
Yep.
I've always wanted to. And they just have this giddy up and go, like, puppy energy. And I'm like, great, okay, I'll help you. But they can't sustain it because it's not immediate enough.
Yeah.
In their idea, being an artist is like immediate. Yeah. Like, they're just going to get it. Or they don't realize that when you're a 60-year-old person, you are set in your ways. Yeah. You are not willing to say no to things or sacrifice.
Or your story of, like, even when you were done with your training and you still didn't feel confident, you were still working through it.
Right.
And we're still working through it.
Yeah.
We're just more confident. But it's not that, like, it was like 4 years I got it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a year.
Years.
Yeah.
30 years
still
later.
A work in progress.
It is a work in progress. And I think, I knew once I went to the American Academy, I kind of felt like, all right, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I was a baby. Did I really know? But then when I met Scott, he was already doing it. So I felt so blessed that there was not a plan B. Mm-hmm. And, and so I think in a way was good. It was good and bad that Scott and I are both artists. We understood the importance of, like, needing to work, so it wasn't like I was mad. In fact, I'm like, Scott, make money. It was like, good, go work. I was never going to say, don't work, or you're working too much. It was like, yeah, that's what we do. We work 7 days a week or whatever. And we knew we weren't going to have kids. But then the bad thing is that we're both freaking artists. Yeah. So that means we don't have a business person. We don't have somebody who really wants to organize all this shit. And so we don't have a wife. We don't have a husband. There's not
a full-time job with benefits and 401k
exactly.
that you can hang on.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are very frugal. And so a lot of times people ask us, like, oh, what is your advice? Well, number one advice is just never get in debt. Yeah. If you can, obviously, we've never been in credit card debt. The only debt we ever had was our house, and we bought an inexpensive one and paid it off in 7 years. Mm. So we just refused. And it's funny because you know how people's families influence how you think about money? Mm-hmm. Like, both of our families were so opposite. 100% opposite in how they dealt with money. But because of that, both Scott and I both are like, you only do with what you can pay for in cash. Mm-hmm. Unless you can completely, fully pay for it, you just don't do it. Yeah. And so if it's a car, if it's a trip, if it's anything, you just don't do it. And so we've always just had that ability to be very frugal. Not buy things, not spend money. And so that's helped us. It's harder if you have kids. It's harder if you live in an expensive part of the world. I think about people who live in California, people who live in New York. Mm. The struggle, the number in your head that you have to make every month. Yeah. I think would give me high blood pressure.
Yeah, anxiety. We were in Queens for 10 years, and I couldn't wait to move out. Yeah. I just wanted a yard. I just wanted space. But of course, the city is alive and electric, but it's within striking distance for me.
Totally.
Go see it.
You hit the jackpot. First of all, you have so many artists around you, but you could take a train into the city. Yeah. Kathy will go. Kathy could go in once or twice a week if she wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I totally agree with all of that. Like, make it as simple as you can and out of debt. That's why some of the college tuition thing, when I was there, that's why I left, actually. The tuition was, I think, $55,000 a year. And I thought, I'm going to have debt of a doctor.
That's another thing, is that when people ask me, and it's usually young people, like in their 20s, and they'll ask me about art school, Scott, I mean, we're probably like the worst because we shouldn't be telling people how to make money. But I mean, I do steer people away from going to any place that they're going to be in
You don't
debt.
need a degree.
I mean, when I went to school, when Scott went to the American Academy, it might have even been less than when I went there. But when I went there, it was only $4,000 a year.
Yeah.
I lived at home.
Mass art, when I went, was $5,000.
So
$5,000 or $5,500.
That's it. It's like, I mean.
And I couldn't afford it. We took student loans out, and then I thought for the rest of my life, I think I walked out with $18,000. No, it was 30, and I was like, I'll be a slave to that forever.
Right. You can't be in debt for art school.
But that was like $30,000, and now students go in 1 year at 55, 60.
But how could this would be something? In fact, we talked to somebody else that visited us not too long ago. This could be something that you could write. I don't know, like a blog about. Is like, it's not sustainable. Yeah. It's like what's a Ponzi scheme?
It seems like it.
I mean, how could you possibly make a living at art? First of all, if you're in debt. But second of all, this idea, like you said, there's all these dogmas and rules that each school will tell you. So people aren't flexible. Yeah. When they get out of school, they feel there's one way, and then there's this judgment. But like when you're in the real world, you just have to do whatever it takes. You have to scrap. You have to,
That's what I did. So when I went to Water Street, I studied with Max Ginsberg as well. And I couldn't afford the tuition, which at the time was $350 a month. That's nothing.
Yeah.
And I ended up working for Jake, fixing his computers. I was his assistant, and he would have me do work for his parents, and they would pay me like $100 an hour to fix their computer. But I still was a waiter at night in the West Village because I was like, I still can't afford it. How am I going to pay my rent? And it's because I don't come from a lot of money. Right. But it's crazy to think like, how could somebody even do it? Now, some of the schools are, you can get financial aid and stuff like that, and then you can get a loan out. Mm-hmm. But I still wouldn't position myself in debt to do it.
A lot of people I know come from a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Who get to go to Florence, who, get to like do the workshop circuit, and they're literally just taking workshops and workshops and workshops. And you can literally just do that. And if you have a hard enough work ethic, because the one thing that school teaches you is to go and do it when you don't want to.
Yeah.
You just go and they complain like this is the stupidest pose ever, blah, blah, or but you just do it. It's like a job. And if you don't have that discipline to get up every day and do it.
I get asked that all the time. Like, how often are you in the studio, and how often are you painting? And Mike Klein was actually a good one. I had heard early when he did an interview, and he was like, I paint like 3 hours. So I interviewed him for the podcast, and I said, is it true that you only do 3? He's like, if that, a day. But for me, I'm like, I don't not think of it. Mm-hmm. But I will go physically to my studio mm-hmm. every day mm-hmm. and sit in it and either prep or think or craft an idea. But mm-hmm. I'm not like in there just burning through canvases.
Yeah, I'm not either. And there's different types of people. There's some, there are some people who are proud. I mean, they'll literally wear a T-shirt that says, I paint 12 hours a day.
That sounds insane to me.
Well, it's what it is it's almost like it turns into a factory. Because, I could lick the canvas for 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
But I remember one of the first times I asked Richard Schmid that, like, how, because we're all, like, curious.
How much does he do?
How much do you paint? Well, he would say the most would be 5 hours.
Yeah.
But he, it was, you get to his level and you get to the people around him, and it's like, it's so much more thinking, less touching. Yeah. So it's like intense. Problem solving.
Yeah.
It's like thinking 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, could you imagine for 3 hours problem solving?
Yes, totally. Yeah. You fall asleep. It's a tennis match.
I need a break.
And, and they've done studies. I remember when I first started to teach, I was reading these books about how to learn because I'm like, and they've done studies that literally you have to build up the amount of ability to concentrate. Yeah. So I tell people first it's 20 minutes, then it's a half hour. But they've done studies even in these neurologists that you should not intensively do anything more than 90 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
So 90-minute chunks, but you have to build up to that.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be that way in the beginning. But like say you've been painting for a long time. Okay, 90 minutes. Then you literally have to take an hour or two off.
Yeah.
Another 90 minutes. And a good day is 3 90-minute chunks.
Yeah.
Of painting.
Yeah, I also recommend students to take breaks.
Yes.
Because it's like you're in it and then you can't see it.
Right.
And then you go take a break or you check your email and you come back and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
That eye's not even in the right place. And I was going to keep going with it.
I know. I love turning my stuff upside down.
I do that too, yeah.
Scott really likes using a mirror. Sometimes he'll turn his stuff. Scott used to be so fast. I would call him the ninja painter. And he's still pretty fast, but he was so fast that, it was too fast for him to think. And then his paintings, I think, did take a leap.
Yeah.
Even though his paintings were always excellent. But he was painting them so fast that he would almost get them done a la prima in like a day or two. And then he consciously decided, I'm going to slow down. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, that's when like intensity happens because it's hard. It's hard to pull the reins back on a horse.
Yeah.
And everybody needs to be able to do that, to be able to like go fast and go slow.
Yeah, there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, I think. And I always say it's similar to the way in which I paint, which is Jacob was slow, Max was fast, Max alla prima, Jacob's more indirect. And I wanted both of them. And Jacob said, don't study with Max. Max didn't really care, but more of like, it's hard to put those two together. And he was correct.
But I'm going to be a devil's advocate because it's interesting that Jacob says that because he's almost sabotaging you. Yeah. Because 1% of people who paint indirect can make a living.
Yeah.
1%, and I'm not exaggerating.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, that was what I felt like. The blue-collar side of me was like, what do I can't spend 70 hours to pay for a pose.
Right.
So I just said, okay, and then I studied with them.
Yeah. On the side. Now, anybody that says stuff like that, I mean, everyone has those things, and you have to, like, kind of, you just sort of like, okay, you just sort of placate them, be like, yeah, sure, great, and have your own opinions. But
yeah, Max to me was much more economical with his time and being able to sell his studies, cranking them out. And it's actually one of the things that people couldn't believe. A few people have come up to me that were like, so you went to Ralph Lauren every single day and came home. I would get up at 6 o'clock, get on the train, get to work at 9:30. Come home, eat dinner. We'd be home at 7. Gina would go to bed at 9, and then I'm like, all right, studio time, 3 hours. And I would just do it every day and cranking out like 4 or 5 paintings a week and then sending them to the gallery, and they started to sell. And
that's amazing.
But with no care, just like, I'm just doing it. And now the full-time job takes a lot of the pressure off. And then now I can play with, I don't have to follow money too much or like what is selling. But yeah, just getting in there and doing it. And there were definitely days when I was like, I just gessoed panels.
Right.
And you listen to a podcast or, watch House or something.
Well, yeah. No, but I'm so impressed with that. I really am impressed with people who find the time to work. And
nobody has more or less time. It's just what you do with it.
No, I mean, I have always been someone who says they don't have enough time for something, a little bit like, you're just making excuses. Now, I mean, I have all the time in the world. What's my excuse if I don't do something? It's totally mental. I completely own it. If I'm procrastinating or I'm scared, I mean, there have definitely been times, and I've talked to friends about it, where I would have this fear about going into the studio. Like, fear of failure, fear of like just one more day of, being disappointed in myself. And it becomes, almost like a phobia to where you're like, I just can't do anything right. So why even go in there? But probably because Scott is doing it, and probably whenever I go through phases like that, that's why, we work a lot from photos, but whenever I'm feeling stuck or stale or my paintings are getting blah, then I just hire things from life. You invite, what I do is I kind of clear out my studio and I have a model over here, and we either have figure drawing or we have portrait, and that kind of brings you back to the joy of like, why do people do art? They do art because it's interesting to study anything that's of life, and light, and having friends and like-minded, and all my friends are artists. Like, I don't even have friends that aren't artists. So it's just, just you get a chance to get together. it brings that fun back. So I have to have both.
Being a kid your whole life and exploring and pivoting and, it's funny. Sometimes I get asked like, the palette you have in there is Still Life. Do you use that? Do you use the grays? And I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do that. And they're like, well, what do you have in your palette now? Or what brush you're using? And I'm like, I don't know. It just depends sometimes what's closest to me. But some days I'm like, I'm just going to take quinacridone magenta and see what that does.
I know.
But it's going to expand my mind. And I forget who said it. Maybe it was Emerson, that once the mind is expanded, it can't go back to the old shape it was. But I find that fascinating because I'm like, I'm not the same person I was yesterday or a week ago or certainly 6 years ago when I wrote it. Like, it's just, it's so playful for me. It's a fun journey. It's not the repetitive nature of going into an office and doing the same thing.
Job. You really do have an amazing life.
Well, we do, right?
Well, no, you're much better than me. It's amazing that, first of all, everything has led you to this like ability to teach, to create art books, to have a beautiful family. Like, you're living your dream, which is so exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's just the word freedom to do what I want. And if I don't want to do the podcast or write more books, like the publisher wants more books, and I'm like, I guess I'm the one to say if I want to do them.
You just need to like get a little, you know what I mean? Negotiate like a little bit better deal, either money or ability to like change it in the way that's better for you. And then, like these are so popular, you could then possibly say, hey, I'll do this book for you this way, but I want to do a book this way, and then agreeing to it.
I definitely have a lot of ideas. What was funny was when Victoria Craven, who's recently passed, she is the one who gave me the chance, which is why the second book was dedicated to her. She passed away as I was writing it, but she got me the second deal too. And she had said, what do you want for your second book? You should do it now. You have an audience. And I was like, I have an audience?
I know. Well, because it's hard to even know what is out there.
Yeah.
That people know who you are. Like you, our friend, like you didn't have it filmed, but my friend, I emailed and I said, he's coming today. Make sure you're coming to the studio and bring your book. And I mean, it's hard to even understand that there are people who think about you when you're not there, or that they are impressed with you, or that they even think about you maybe once a day because your book is on their table. And it's like a vague, obtuse idea that they're thinking of you, but you're still
somebody's peripheral.
You're like influencing them, which is so fascinating. I get that too. Like, I remember years ago, I think it was one of the second weekend with the Masters, and there was a whole group of these young guy artists, and I was still very much like, I'm a nobody, this or that, blah, blah, blah. And I remember they were like shy to meet me, and I was sitting at a table with them, and they were really shy, and they were hardly saying anything, and they just finally said, I have a big folder of you on my computer. And I was like, what? And they all had saved images of mine, so they thought of me all the time.
Yeah.
Which is like a weird thing, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like how that's so weird. But that we are doing influence each other, and I guess that's also a way to have responsibility to always be honest, always be transparent. Like that's probably you were saying what's important. Like to me, transparency, because I never want to con anyone. I never want anyone to think that life is easier or this or that, or like some artists like to have an image of success or like everything goes correctly, and I guess I would never. I wouldn't. I don't. Why would I want that?
Yeah, I think Rockwell said, like, I don't want my kids to be painters. It's too hard, right? Or illustrators.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is hard, but
I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think it's because I just worked too many other jobs that were never satisfied. But this one's unpredictable, and I get to kind of push it wherever I want.
Well, you're totally a rock star. And, like, I can't even imagine, like, 4 or 5 years from now, like, things are going to be exponential for you.
Yeah.
It's all right.
I still want to hide.
No, well, it's okay, but you can. You can hide. But it's like, but it's just the enthusiasm, and I guess it's the knowing that you're going in the right direction. Like you're literally going in the right direction. Emerson, like you said that. The one thing about Mr. Parks is my life drawing teacher is one of the things that he was so wonderful about was that every day he would have a new saying taped to the door. And one of them was by Emerson. It says, nothing great ever happens without enthusiasm. And so each day you would just have these sayings. I mean, like, it was just quotes, inspirational. And so it just thoughts, and you're like, right. Like, I also feel like, like you follow your goosebumps, or that when something really like catches your eye, that's the direction to go. And it's like day by day, even though you can't see the bigger picture, 5 years from now, and it's, who cares? We don't want to live in the future, but it's like, at least you're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's a couple more books out there that I'll probably do.
Well, you never have to retire. You just do them on your own pace.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And when I spoke to Michael at Monticelli, I said, they want it. And I said, that's great. And I said, I'll probably do one, but I didn't say when. And I always follow my heart. And it's like when the time is right, I have a bunch of kind of starts for them. But one of the ideas for me is like maybe even an inspirational book, like to me, I love The Art Spirit by Robert Henri. It's such a fantastic book, but a coaching book would be kind of cool, of like these stories that we're talking about. Like, it's not easy. Yeah. How do you motivate yourself to kind of get up every day and get in habits that put you in the studio and get you closer at least to successfully doing something rather than thinking about it. Yeah. Yeah, because being an artist is attainable. It's just putting it into baby steps and chunks, because I think I remember, and I told you when I first started art school or like even in high school, when I looked at that program on George O'Keeffe, it's like, learning Chinese. You're thinking, there's no way. There's no possible way I'm going to be able to paint an eye. And there's the doubt of like, I remember at one point at Water Street, I was like, am I going to be the only one who doesn't get it that comes through this program? But then you won't be the most famous. Well, I had asked a friend, I was like, am I like the one that you all like look at and you're like, he'll never get it? And my friend Hasoon was like, no, not at all. Right. You're totally getting it. But the group also was teaching each other, which is just what's fascinating about it. But I think we just all have that self-doubt. I don't know. It doesn't sound like Scott ever did. But. No, I mean, Scott has self-doubt, but it's just, it was probably, it's just a different way. It's a different thinking. Like, he doesn't get performance anxiety. Like, for him, I did. I used to almost puke when I started teaching. Yes. That was college. Yeah. Yeah. He loves to have people come to his studio. He would spend 3 hours showing every single piece in his files and just talking about him. I mean, Richard Schmid was the same way. It's just this, art is a form of expression and speaking to other people. Yeah. So he could have no problem. Like, I always tell this story because he's so brave. Like, one time we went to Madrid. Have you ever been to Madrid and the Prado? Yeah. So the Prado is the biggest art museum in the world, bigger than the Louvre. And, he loves to go out and paint. And I remember I was with it was a painting trip. And Scott goes off and paint. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll meet you in a little bit. And he says, oh, I'm just painting in front of the Prado. So we walk. So you have to stand in line to get into the Prado. He set up in the looking line at a church. People had to walk around him. I still remember that because me and my friend walked up and I just started to laugh. It was before I even did my blog. I mean, that's why I do these things, because I would love to document us walking up and him not having a care in the world and just having to have people walk around him. Yeah. Or like him painting on the Alhambra and it being illegal. And he just 5 guards coming up and trying different languages and him pretending he didn't speak the language. And so he just kept painting and they gave up. So he just kept painting and looking. I mean, it's like he has no fear. I mean, I have some fear, So. Yeah. It reminds me of there's a quote by Rumi, and he says, I want to sing like birds sing without a care who listens or what they think. Sounds like he's there. That is true. But anyone that looks at this, they tend to like Google or whatever. No, I want to promote your books. I want to promote your podcast. Oh, I appreciate that. You drove out of the way to come here. Like, Well, what if somebody, you teach a lot? I don't know if you teach a lot, but you teach and you do workshops.
So because of COVID, like everybody, it's a learning curve, but started to do every now and then online classes. And I think it's my calling.
Yeah, I love it too.
It is my freaking calling. Most people don't like it. I feel, but that's the great thing, is that I don't consider myself to be a ham. I'm really not. You see, I'm animated. There is something about Zoom and being able to talk to people from everywhere and seeing their faces. I get off on it so much. Yeah. I love it. So because of COVID, I started to do online classes. I do them every now and then. And we started like literally April 1st, 2020. Like, like everyone, like we had shows and trips and workshops planned for a year. Everything got canceled. Yeah. And it was like a freaky, scary time. And I did not know anything about Patreon. I think I had heard one artist like on Facebook. The name was like Patreon. Okay. So I literally just signed up, made every mistake in the book. In fact, for the first 2 months, I didn't even get paid because I clicked the wrong box. Mm-hmm. And nothing to poo-poo Patreon, but they do not have the best customer service. And so, I mean, it was like, am I going to keep doing this for free? So finally it got fixed, but, and to begin with, Scott didn't want to do it. Like, Scott's in his own world. Like, he wants to do what he wants to do. And until he sees how, it can be fun, once I did it for a couple months, I don't know how to film. I don't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do anything. Yeah. I was literally using my phone. I was like, Scott, you don't want to do it. Like, fine, I'll do it. Like, I'm like, I got to do something. And I'm not a perfectionist. So anyone that watches the very first videos, just laugh. I mean,
same with me.
Just laugh. Yeah. Look at all the out of focus things. I even like to edit.
I didn't know where the manual focus button was either.
So I literally just put in titles. I said, just laugh. Just laugh. Or like sometimes in my YouTube videos, I will be filming myself doing the stupidest things. Sometimes like completely bad to where I have to go back and do like a customer service thing. All right, you saw me do that. That's not good. Don't do that. Like, please, I left it in because I want you guys to see that I actually am an idiot and we all do stupid things. So sometimes my head is like, I think it's funny. Like, I'm not a perfectionist. So I like the fact that people say, it's people, as you know, when you're teaching online, it's the energy. Yeah. Things are going to go wrong. Now, if you get stressed out, people will get stressed out. But if you laugh and you kind of go with the flow, like I had a class in February, totally out of the blue, the whole building went out, like internet and lights and everything. I was like, what the frack? I couldn't even get internet on my phone. So I'm running around. It was like 5 minutes, maybe 8 minutes before I could get back online. As you know, with Zoom now, people were still there. So finally, what happens is, if you start a Zoom class and we get kicked off, the next person who joined, the first person who joined becomes host. So I finally got back on Zoom and I was like, oh my God, you guys are all still here. And they're like, yeah, we're just getting to know each other. And you realize we're all in on this. And I was doing stupid stuff. Yeah. And a lady was like, I think you kind of need to do this and then that with the spotlight. I was like, thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think it has to do with if you laugh, because we realize
laugh at ourselves,
5% of people know what they're doing with tech. Yeah. Like you, maybe Scott. It's like most people were all like, what the heck? I do not know what I'm doing.
I don't think I do.
But more than most. So most people have a hard time even turning their sound on or whatever. And so if we could all laugh at it. Anyways, long story short, I started a Patreon. It is a goofy Patreon, but Scott and I do lessons. We do videos. It's really all over the place because Scott would like to teach maybe one thing and I'll teach another thing. And then we put them under categories like I'm sure you have. And people can choose and we do stuff on photography, Photoshop. I do stuff about traveling and painting. Sometimes like what I'm going to do, like I've done stuff on like my favorite books and I'll do a whole video of talking about what I've learned from a book. Yeah. And they range from like 8 minutes to like 2 hours. And so they're it's a variety of videos. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then do you do in-person stuff too?
I do, yeah. So I mentor through Patreon. People can sign up to do like one-on-one Zooms. So I meet people and we just chat. Everyone's different. So some people want a plan.
Yeah.
Like some people tell you, like, I kind of want you to tell me homework. I want you to tell me what to do. Other people are like, well, here, I'm working on this. Can you help me with that?
Mm-hmm.
And some people, you know, it's a gambit of things. A lot of times it is just being a cheerleader. It's kind of like talking things through and saying, hey, this is what I would do. You know, like, or maybe I see you're working on this photograph. Hey, let me help you with this. Like, I see that, like, let's work on it because this is too confusing. Let me show you how I would do this. But I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. I just love to help and get people to create and express.
You become really friends.
Yeah.
You get to, like, be pen pals with people who are artists. And if you have, like, I kind of feel like we were talking about, like, everything led up to your life right now to have the ability of all these different facets. I kind of feel the same thing with me. Like, everything has led up to this time in my life where all the doubt or all these things that I had to work through, somehow I can help people. And, like, what? Oh, my God, it's, like, the best thing ever. It really is. Like,
right. And you could stop it tomorrow if you want and do something else. Yeah, no, I know but you're there in a place where you love it.
Yeah, I totally love it. And that's the great thing is that, like, Scott wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not that he doesn't want to help. He almost, I don't know, it's like he's so into what he's doing, but when he teaches or helps and we do online things together, he loves it, but he doesn't like to organize it. You know, it's like he likes to demo and he likes to help people, but he doesn't want to do the typewriting and the critiques and that type of stuff afterwards. Like, I love it. So that's why it's a good combination. You know, it's not everybody has to do everything.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it's a great place to stop.
Hey, I can't wait. So you'll come back next year and maybe I'll see you in October.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me in the studio.
You get to hug. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Oh my God.